My name is Walter Greer. I'm 90 years old, and I've been sitting here for the better part of an hour trying to decide whether to turn this thing on or not. I'm not sure why I'm doing this. My granddaughter set up the camera last spring, said it would be good for me to talk, said people might want to listen to someone who's been around as long as I have. I told her I didn't have anything interesting to say. She laughed and kissed me on the forehead, the way she used to when she was small. That was 8 months ago. I haven't turned it on until today. I think I know why today. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes at this age. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind you earn after a long day. It's the other kind. The kind that has weight to it. The kind that sits across from you at the breakfast table and doesn't say anything, but doesn't leave either. I've been living with that quiet for a while now, and there's one thing, one specific thing, that lives inside that quiet with me. I've never said it out loud. Not to my wife Margaret, God rest her, not to my son David, not to the pastor I've known for 30 years, not to a single person on this earth. I heard something the night my father died, and I need to say it before I go. I don't know why it has to be said, maybe it doesn't, but it has to go somewhere. It can't stay inside this chest anymore. There isn't much room left. Let me tell you a little about where I come from first, because this doesn't make sense without that. I grew up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania. 3,000 people on a good day. The kind of place where everyone knew which families had money, and which families were getting by, and which families were quietly falling apart behind closed doors. We were the third kind. My father, Harold Greer, was not a cruel man. I want to be careful when I say that. He was not cruel, but he was closed, sealed off in some way that none of us, not my mother, not my sister Ruth, not me, could ever quite reach him. He went to work. He came home. He sat in his chair. He read the paper. He went to bed. That was the shape of his life, and we moved around it, quietly, the way you move around furniture in a dark room. You learn where things are. You learn not to bump into them. I don't remember him ever putting his arm around me. I'm not saying that to wound him. He's been gone for over 50 years. I say it because it matters for what I'm about to tell you. I was 37 years old when he died. I had a wife by then, a son, a small house with a leaky roof I kept meaning to fix. I was working at the paper mill outside of town. I was tired most of the time in the way that young fathers are tired. A good kind of tired, mostly. Full. My mother called me on a Tuesday morning in February. She said your father had a bad night. She said the doctor had been. She said I should come. I drove the 40 minutes to my parents' house in the snow. I remember the way the windshield kept fogging up, and I kept wiping it with the back of my hand. I remember the radio was on and I turned it off because it felt wrong. The music, it felt like it was playing for someone else. When I got to the house, my mother met me at the door. She looked very small. She looked like she had aged since I'd last seen her, which had only been 3 weeks before at Christmas. Grief does that to people. It starts early. She told me he was awake. She told me to go in. His bedroom was at the end of a short hallway. I walked down that hallway, and I remember every step of it. The floral wallpaper my mother had put up in 1958, the small table with the telephone on it, the smell of that house, wood, and something medicinal, and something underneath that I can only describe as old winter. The door was slightly open. I pushed it and went in. My father was lying in the bed. He looked smaller than I remembered. That's the thing no one prepares you for. How illness reduces a person physically. He had always seemed large to me, even though he wasn't a large man. He had seemed solid, permanent. He didn't look permanent anymore. He looked at me when I came in. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Walter," just my name. I sat down in the chair next to the bed. We talked for a little while. I don't remember exactly what we said. It was ordinary talk. The weather. My son, his grandson, who was 4 years old. Whether the mill was busy. I kept waiting for something else. I don't know what I was waiting for. I couldn't have named it then. But I was waiting. It didn't come. After about an hour, he said he was tired. I told him I'd be right outside. He closed his eyes. I went and sat in the kitchen with my mother. We drank coffee and she told me stories I'd already heard, about when they first moved to that house, about a neighbor who'd been kind to them once a long time ago. She talked the way people talk when they're trying to fill something up. Around 10 o'clock, she said she was going to lie down for a little while. She hadn't slept. I told her to go ahead. I'd stay up. The house got very quiet. I sat there at that kitchen table for a long time. I could hear the wind outside. I could hear the refrigerator. I could hear my own breathing. And then I heard something else. I want to stop here for a moment. I've started to say this so many times over the years. To Margaret in the dark, when I thought she might be asleep. To the ceiling at 3 in the morning. To a priest in a confessional booth once. 20 years ago. But I lost my nerve at the last second and said something else entirely. The thing I heard that night has lived in me like a stone in still water. It doesn't move. It doesn't change. It's just there. Always there. I heard my father crying. That's what I heard. From down the hallway, through the slightly open door of his bedroom. I heard my father, Harold Greer, the closed man, the sealed man, the man I had never once in 37 years seen show anything that could be called softness. I heard him crying, not loudly, not the way a child cries. It was quiet, controlled almost. Like someone who had learned a long time ago to keep sound small, like someone who had been practicing silence their whole life. And this was the one moment the silence had given way. I sat at that kitchen table, and I did not move. I don't know how long it lasted. A few minutes, maybe less. And then it stopped, and the house was quiet again. I never went down that hallway. I never opened the door. I never sat on the edge of that bed and put my hand on my father's arm. I never said I'm here. I never said I'm not going anywhere. I never said I'm whatever it was that a son might say to a father who is finally in the last hours of his life allowing himself to feel something. I sat at that kitchen table. I listened to the refrigerator. I told myself he wouldn't want me to see him like that. I told myself it would embarrass him. I told myself I was giving him privacy, dignity. I told myself a lot of things. He died before morning. End of script. Part 1. Script, Part 2. The funeral was on a Friday. There were maybe 60 people there. Colleagues from the plant where he'd worked before he retired. Neighbors. People from the church, though my father was never what I'd call a religious man. He went because my mother went. He sat in the pew and looked straight ahead and stood and sat and stood again, and that was the extent of it. I gave a short eulogy. I talked about his work ethic. I talked about his steadiness. I talked about the way he showed up for the family, for the job, for the town. All of it was true. None of it touched what I actually knew about him, which wasn't much. That was the part I couldn't say standing up there in front of those 60 people. That I had lived in the same house as this man for 18 years, and then had been his son for 19 more years after that. And I did not know him. I did not know what made him laugh when no one was watching. I did not know what he had wanted to be before life made him into what he was. I did not know if he was proud of me, or disappointed in me, or somewhere in between in some complicated place I never thought to ask about. I did not know what he was crying about that night, and I never would. Margaret knew something was wrong with me when I got home after the funeral. She had that way, a lot of women have that way, I think, of reading the air around a person. You didn't have to say anything. She already knew the shape of what you were carrying. Even if she didn't know the contents, she didn't push. That was one of the great mercies of my marriage. She never pushed. She made dinner. She let me be quiet at the table. She put her hand on my arm before we went to sleep, and she said, "You don't have to be all right now." I said, "I know, I wasn't all right." But I also didn't say what had happened, what I'd heard, what I hadn't done. I told myself there wasn't anything to say. I told myself it was private. His private moment. That it belonged to him, and I had no right to carry it out of that house. But the truth, and I've had 53 years to sit with this truth, the truth is I didn't say anything, because I didn't know how. I didn't have the words. I don't know if I had ever been given the words for that kind of thing. For saying, "I heard you, I was there. You didn't have to be alone in that." Nobody taught me those words, and I never learned them on my own. Not in time. My son David is 61 years old now. He lives in Oregon with his wife and their 2 kids who are grown themselves. We talk on the phone on Sunday evenings. We talk about the weather and about his work and about the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and sometimes about Margaret, who has been gone 11 years now. He is a good man, a good father from what I can see. Better than I was, I think. Warmer, more present in some way I can see from the outside but couldn't always manage from the inside. There have been moments over the years, moments when I've been on the phone with him and something shifts in the conversation, some quiet opens up and I think now, say it now, tell him you're proud of him, tell him what it meant when he drove 400 miles to sit with you after Margaret died, tell him you love him in the way that means something beyond the habit of saying it. But then the moment passes. One of us makes a joke, or the grandchildren make noise in the background. Or I say, well, I should let you go, and he says, all right, Dad, talk next week, and that's that. I've missed more of those moments than I've taken. I'm aware of that. I've thought about my father's crying for 53 years, not every day, not in some dramatic, haunted way. Just, it's there, it comes when it comes. On quiet mornings, on certain nights in February, when the wind sounds a particular way, when I'm sitting in this chair by the window, and the light is going, and the room gets that color that rooms get in winter, that particular grey gold, and something about it is just the kitchen of my mother's house, and I'm 37 again, sitting very still, listening. I've built up explanations over the years. Maybe he was in pain, physical pain. He had been sick for a while by then. Maybe it was simply the body asking for release. Maybe he was thinking about my mother, about leaving her. They had been married 41 years. Whatever their life together had been, and I didn't fully know that either, it was 41 years. You don't leave 41 years without feeling something. Maybe he was thinking about all the things he'd never done, never seen. Maybe there was something he'd wanted that life had simply not given him, and he knew now that it never would. Maybe he was afraid. I don't know. I will never know. That's the part that doesn't resolve. I've heard people say that regret is a waste of time, that you can't change the past, so there's no point in going back to it. I understand what they mean. I don't think they're entirely wrong. But I also think, and this is just an old man talking, this isn't wisdom, I want to be clear about that. I think there's something in the going back, not to punish yourself, not even to understand, but just to acknowledge what happened, to look at it directly and say, yes, that is what occurred. That is what I did or didn't do. That is what was lost. There is something in naming it. I didn't name this for 53 years. I'm naming it now. I'm not sure it changes anything. But the stone feels slightly different than it did an hour ago. Still there, still heavy, but slightly different. If my father were here, and I mean here, in this room, in the chair across from this camera, I don't know what I would say to him. I used to think I'd have questions, that if I ever got another hour with him, I'd use it to finally understand who he was, what his life had felt like from inside, what he thought of me. But I think now I might not ask anything. I think I might just sit with him, the way I should have sat with him that night, down that hallway, in that bedroom, in the dark, just close enough so he'd know someone was there. That's all it would have taken. I understand that now. I understood it probably 20 years ago, if I'm honest. But understanding a thing and knowing what to do with it are not the same. I've been sitting here talking for a while now, and I should probably stop soon. This isn't easy. Not because it's painful exactly. It's more like carrying something a long distance and finally setting it down. Your arms don't quite know what to do once the weight is gone. I don't know who is going to watch this. Maybe no one. Maybe my granddaughter will find it after I'm gone and watch it with her hand over her mouth the way she does when something surprises her. Maybe that's why I'm saying it now. Not because it changes anything. It doesn't. But because silence has a cost. I didn't fully understand when I was the age when it would have mattered. I'm 90 years old. I heard my father crying, and I did not go to him. That is the true shape of it. That is what I needed to say. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. I mean that simply, not as a performance of gratitude. Just thank you. If there's something sitting quietly in you, something you've been carrying without naming it, I hope you find a way to set it down before it's time to. Not for anyone else. Just because things that are named are lighter than things that aren't. That's all. I'm going to turn this off now.